Video games aren't getting any easier, and we've got proof. Here are 20 games from the last 10 years that push the player base to the absolute limit. These games start tough and only get tougher. Here are 20 harsh difficulty curves in video games, in no real particular order. Starting off at number 20, look, we're all talking about difficulty in video games because of Hollow Knight's Silksong at the time of making this video. And while the discourse, the conversation might be a little overblown, this is undeniably a difficult game. It rewards players with a lot of patience though. Basically, every boss is exponentially more mechanically complex than the bosses in the original Hollow Knight. And even the exploration between bosses is a lot more brutal. Enemies behave with more complex attack patterns, platforming requires a whole lot more precision from the player. The first big difficulty spike comes from the Sinner's Road area. Well, you're gonna have to learn how to bounce attack real fast. What makes Silksong especially tough compared to the other game is that like the aggression is the only way to heal yourself. You know, you're not getting like a big old Estus flask or anything like that in Elden Ring. Like, the only way to restore your health is to spend your Silk meter, which only really recharges when you land sword attacks against enemies. When big enemies can knock out half your health just by nudging you gently with contact damage, even regular attacks become very dangerous to even attempt. There's so much risk reward. Silksong expects a lot out of the player, but you'll slowly learn to handle its difficulty curve. The game only gets harder, but once you've learned to handle that brutality, it becomes a bit more bearable. Probably the best example of the brutal difficulty curve comes from a secret area that's hated by basically everyone. Biowater is this poisonous swamp with tough platforming and an extremely long run back to a boss that's also really annoying. Grawl the Great is a difficulty check, not just because of the boss himself, but because of the obnoxious platforming challenge you'll have to repeat just to beat him. Luckily, for all those wondering, there is a hidden bench that makes the whole run back a bit shorter, and runbacks in this game are generally brutal. And you'll learn, like we did, that bombs are very useful against Grawl. Like everything in Silksong, it feels impossible until you win. Then you wonder why you thought it was so bad in the first place. Now, next over at number 19, Doom Eternal brutalizes you pretty early in the game. In the first level, you'll quickly realize this game isn't messing around if you're playing on any difficulty above easy. After getting the shotgun and seeing your max ammo is about 20 shells, we knew the game was not like our friend, you know? Once you reach the infamous Marauder enemy with his BS invincibility shield, annoying ghost dog summons, and relentless attacks, you're going to be praying to find extra lives. This game is especially cruel considering it's like the sequel to Doom 2016, which was not that bad. Really, all the old Doom games are kind of easy by today's standards, you know, unless you're like a mod sicko. But look, Doom Eternal aimed to really change that. This is a sweaty game, and the true evil of Doom Eternal's difficulty curve, like it showed itself in the Ancient Gods Part 1 DLC that not a lot of people, like not enough people played. It's got some BS elements, but it's underrated. Somehow the developers managed to make this expansion too difficult. Later patches actually made it easier, and our breaking point came halfway through, roughly. Look, most players don't consider it that difficult, no, because most players truly hate the final boss, set inside a transforming arena as swarms of enemies spawn in. The only way to win against this guy is to collect as many extra lives as possible and pray his rare damage window opens up just long enough to kill him before he flies away. Anyone that's played this expansion knows how cruel it is, and the Ancient Gods Part 2 only ratchets up the pain with a final boss that can literally last forever if you're not good enough, man. It's one of the most cruel difficulty ramping ups in video games, and we can't get good enough. It's both a relief and a little disappointing, depending on who you ask, that Doom the Dark Ages didn't really try to kill us this much. Next at number 18, Shadow of the Erdtree feels like the peak of the mountain when it comes to harsh difficulty curves, man. If you thought the original Elden Ring was a shock to the system, Shadow of the Erdtree throws so much more, basically right from the start. In like the first minute, a giant unkillable golem will burn your Tarnished alive with a big giant unblockable fireball. That's just how these games roll. Eventually, after dozens of deaths, you might learn how to actually kill one of the golems, but you'll have to face many more brutal trials before that even happens. So Shadow of the Erdtree is so harsh because even your high-level character doesn't stand a chance in the new realm. You'll have to hunt down new types of upgrade items, Erdtree fragments. They upgrade how much damage you'll do in the Land of Shadow only, and another item exclusively makes your spirit summon stronger. Those fragments are essential to progression because if you don't collect as many as possible, your wimpy attacks will barely scratch the enemies in this expansion, like at all. Your first truly evil boss fight appears in the settlement near the start of the game. The Divine Beast Dancing Lion boss is a raw test of skill that's also just a sick joke. This thing spins around, launching multiple types of magic attacks wildly in all directions, becoming ridiculously difficult to predict or even defend against. He's just a bastard, and it isn't even close to the toughest boss in the DLC. Bosses like Mesmer the Impaler and Baal the Dread have become legendary in the community. The biggest skill check is at the very end. Unlike the original Elden Ring, the toughest boss here is not an optional secret fight. The final boss is the final boss, and he is crushingly difficult. It's the kind of challenge we're still not really sure how we won, and we're not sure we could repeat that success solo without like 100 more attempts. Shadow of the Erdtree really redefines the difficulty curve. It's more like climbing a difficulty mountain. Next at number 17, some games make exploration relatively easy, while progression is an uphill battle. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is the opposite. This is a game where simply existing in this world can be pretty rough, pretty much a slog. Every step you'll be baffled, bamboozled, and sunk under a dozen complicated game systems. It takes a while to really learn the ropes here. You'll get dirty, so everyone hates you. You're so feeble with a sword that every wandering low-level bandit can just beat your ass and rob you. You start the game with nothing, not even skills. And even if the player is like the best swordsman in the world, you're still gonna get curb stomped a lot. Humiliation is like your entire life for the first few hours of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and it's where most everyone is gonna give up. If you can persevere, if you can learn like the really complicated potion brewing system to create valuable items you'll need to make to save or heal, if you can get yourself a decent set of armor and a good sword, then the game starts to slowly click, and maybe you'll make some more progress. Working your way through the starting area, once you get a horse and get just good enough at fighting to learn the Master Strike ability, then the game becomes a little less oppressive. You feel a little more enabled. Eventually, you'll have enough cash to buy a house, travel the world, and eventually face off against more tough enemies. At the start of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, a single muddy guy drunk at a bar can put you in your grave. But by the end, you're infiltrating giant camps of heavily armed enemies, and you could wipe them all out if you got the patience. This game gives you everything you need to eventually win, but you gotta put up with a whole lot of pain before actually getting there. Next at number 16, it's not enough to know the answers to the puzzles in Blueprints. It's one of the most absorbing puzzle games of the year, and it's also like one of the most hair-pullingly difficult. You're only one step away from success. If only the game actually spawned one more key or one more apple or one more gem. There's never enough resources to go around. In this game, you're sent into a house where the layout changes every day. You start with a limited number of steps. You spend a step for every room you enter, and your goal is to reach the top of the layout. Reaching the top is the easy part. Heck, reaching the antechamber, the last room, isn't too bad. The game doesn't get cruel until you realize that there's one final door you must open to get through the antechamber. And that particular lever is a lot harder to unlock. From that point on, the game becomes more about like exploring the grounds and discovering every secret you can. Whether it's opening a lost tomb or like a hidden switches in some rooms that unlock the elevator, and then things get even more complicated when reaching room 46. This is a game that becomes more head-scratchingly difficult the further you dive into it, slowly turning a puzzle game into an ARG. If you're not working with friends online or just looking stuff up to figure out the final puzzles and blueprints, you're not really solving them. Next at number 15, Cuphead, of course, is an infamously difficult game that doesn't even give you a big world to play around in like Hollow Knight Silksong. There's nothing else to Cuphead but big, elaborate boss battles that just whittle away at your sanity the further you get into the game. By the third island and the third set of bosses, this game kicks into high gear and does not stop, throwing punishing and beautifully animated cool bosses at you every step of the way. The game serves the toughest boss right before the end. King Dice is a boss rush instead of a traditional boss. You'll get a random fight for every stage, and each encounter has its own patterns to learn. King Dice is one of the biggest, toughest boss fights in video game history.
This match will get red hot. Now go!
And the only way to progress is to just get better. And it isn't the only one. Everyone has their own most hated boss in Cuphead, and the DLC adds even more complex, wacky, overwhelming bosses to memorize. The apocalyptically difficult Chef Saltbaker boss is something that you gotta see it to believe it. It's insane. There are no upgrades to find or attacks to unlock or new weapons to practice. Cuphead is an elemental game that forces you to master its very simple gameplay. If you can't win with what this game gives you, the few tools you have, then you just can't win, period. Next at number 14, Sifu. It's a little like Cuphead. You know, if you had a limited number of lives and had to restart from the beginning if you died too many times, Sifu teaches through repetition because you'll be repeating these levels over and over and over again with the sole aim of winning without dying too many times. The more you die, the older you get, and the fewer second chances you'll have to reach the final boss. And this game checks your skills, I'd say as early as the second level boss. Sean the MMA fighter is your first true challenge and tests your dodging abilities really to the max. Dodging isn't so easy in Sifu either. You can't just dodge and parry, bing bong boom. You have to weave in just the right way, then deliver a punishing attack to deal maximum structure damage to your opponent. Just beating enemies up isn't enough. Breaking their structure, or essentially like their guard meter, is really the only true way to beat a boss. Yes, it isn't good enough to just win like a normal person at Sifu, and that means you have to break every boss's structure, which also means you have to beat them up twice in a row. That makes each fight like exponentially more difficult. Like, think about it. It forces you to absolutely master all these bosses. And remember, there is no run back here. You can't just like reload a save and run up and refight a boss. You'll have to fight through a level's worth of goons just for a second chance. And often you'll need to repeat the entire game from the start. It all leads to a truly oppressively difficult final boss that can counter pretty much everything you have. Your special move you've been using as a crutch for the rest of the game, that don't work on Yang the leader. He might be like the nastiest boss in video games in a while, and it's a painful climb up a steep difficulty curve to even reach him.
Show me.
Next at number 13, Baba Is You is a very different kind of difficulty curve. We've talked about this game before just because it's one of the brain twistiest games we've ever played. It's a game based on using simple logic to reach the goal. An icon of you, Baba, equals you. That means you control Baba. Things get increasingly more complex and difficult as more elements are added to the mix. When you can move around the word is to completely change how the tiny pixel level you're in works, the logic of the levels just gets a lot trickier to solve. This is absolutely a game where you'll start at a place of understanding before quickly devolving into just pure confusion. It's a programming logic game with none of the command lines, right? So it's a game that forces you to think really like a programmer. This is the type of puzzle game some people are just never gonna solve. And we've got plenty of evidence. No one gets lost and confused at exactly the same time because you're given so many different options for puzzles really to complete. But everyone eventually reaches a breaking point with this game. There's always the one level where nothing at all seems like it makes sense and the solution doesn't feel anywhere even close. Even reading guides for this game, explaining how to solve puzzles step by step doesn't really help. Some of these solutions might as well feel like magic. It's rough. Next at number 12, Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. It's underrated, but it's also really hard as hell. I think it surpassed the infamous original games in terms of just pure, sweaty platforming difficulty. The Crash Bandicoot games don't have any of that like Mario kindness. They'll give you infinite lives and then ask for the impossible. Crash 4 isn't that tough early on, especially if you're familiar with like these types of games, but it ramps up in a way we just were not expecting. For our money, the futuristic level crate escape is actually as tough as people claim. You'll be hopping over a bottomless pit using flying space luggage just to reach the exit. It's like the bridge level from the original Crash, but 10 times worse. And it isn't even close to the toughest level. Like most of the Crash games, Crash 4 becomes truly difficult when you're really aiming for 100% completion, when you're really going for all the bonus and secret stuff. All those levels riding dinosaurs or tiny polar bears are just infinitely more difficult when you can't miss any crates and you need memorization and precision. They're just downright cruel, but at least those levels are short. That can't be said for Toxic Tunnels. This is like a marathon of a level that can only be unlocked with optional gems. The extended version of the level is a gauntlet through freaking hell and can take probably well over an hour of just carefully platforming to finish. It is evil. And if you're crazy enough to keep playing after the credits roll, you'll have to play all these hard levels a second time at minimum to earn 100% completion. The platinum trophy for this game is so rare because players estimate it takes almost 88 hours to do everything. That's about 8 times the length of a standard run, and that is just a true test of gaming patience. And you never know it just looking at a cute little mascot Crash Bandicoot game. Next over at number 11, here's one you might not have expected, Mafia Definitive Edition. It takes one of the most infamous difficulty spikes in video game history and actually makes it more difficult. The infamous racetrack mission forces your gangster to drive an old-timey race car, and it controls as bad as it looks. It's a racer that steers like a weird bus on ice, and it accelerates like a rocket ship. You'll wreck your vehicle with a single scrape against the edges of the track. And if your vehicle goes down, then there's no repairing it. On the game's difficulty that's meant to emulate the challenge of the original, you basically have to drive with absolute robotic precision. Nudge another car and you're dead. Don't brake hard enough for the turn and you're dead. Don't accelerate enough on a straightaway and you're dust. This is an infamous mission in both the original and the remake, and it is the most common difficulty spike that ended a lot of playthroughs. Just in the regular old Mafia that released back in the day, I remember playing this and losing my absolute mind. Then, Mafia Definitive Edition, on normal mode, it feels way easier. But if you pick the higher difficulty, it is worse. Trust us. Next at number 10, Wolong Fallen Dynasty is yet another dark fantasy game based in Chinese mythology. We've been seeing a lot of these games, but Wolong is the first and might be the meanest of them all. It's designed by Team Ninja, so you know what they're doing. This is kind of like a sort of an extension to their Neo games with different gameplay elements, but it's just as tough. Wolong throws the player in the deep end on minute 1 and forces you to fight a perfect battle in like the first couple of minutes. We can only assume the developers patched the game later to make the opening hour a little easier, because that first boss requires absolute precision before you're able to even figure out the controls. The start is bumpy, but look, it's the game just trying to teach you. It gets worse. It gets so much worse. Later, you'll fight the infamous Romance of the Three Kingdoms hero, Lu Bu. And this is genuinely the most difficult battle in the game, probably. The warlord that's attained mythical status as the greatest warrior of all time in the Dynasty Warriors video games also appears here as a towering knight that'll just like ruin your day dozens and dozens of times. It's a killer fight that's completely etched into our brains forever. I know a lot of people have kind of forgotten about this game, but if you've played it through to the end, you're going to remember it. Next at number 9, the developers at Owlcat Games don't make life easy for CRPG fans. The creators of the Pathfinder series like to ratchet up the difficulty right when you're getting complacent. And with Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, they throw multiple spanners in the works before you're even ready. An early encounter against a single Chaos Space Marine is just enough to wipe out your weak little party. And it's an important skill check for every ensuing battle, everything you're gonna face in this game. The challenges only get like insanely tougher from there. And broken character strategies are absolutely necessary if your party is gonna survive the onslaught of tough tactical combat encounters. Maybe it's the only way to add difficulty, because your main character is the head honcho of an entire sector of space. You could choose if entire planets of people live or die, and everyone has to listen to you, no matter how unhinged you roleplay. You might be a powerful figure in human politics, but when a band of sadistic Dark Elder capture your team, the fight gets overwhelmingly difficult. Look, it's a fun little game, but it's one that never lets you rest on your laurels for too long, and that's what keeps this top-down RPG so engaging. Next at number 8, Ready or Not simulates realistic SWAT missions in a way that we haven't really seen in a long time, especially for single player or co-op shooters. This isn't a giant military simulation like Arma, and it isn't strictly a multiplayer game. This is a grim and gritty, boots on the ground, hardcore shooter that's about as hardcore as these games come. It's about stacking up against doors, taking things slow, being tactical, choosing your shots. And because this is technically a police game, the tension is ratcheted up to peak levels because you're trying to arrest the roaming gunman and you're trying to preserve civilian life.
Your LSPD, don't move!
Every encounter is unpredictable in a way it isn't in a lot of other first-person shooters. In your average shooter, it's a binary choice. If you see a bad guy with a gun, you shoot him. In Ready or Not, if you want to pass the mission with a good score, you actually have to make arrests. And Ready or Not is one of the more deadly games on this list. You and your team can get taken out like in an instant. If you don't catch a guy hiding in the corner, boom, you're done. In some missions, killers disguise themselves as civilians or just play possum before ambushing your team with an automatic gun. Tense missions are filled with booby traps or bombs, and suspects will take hostages, and when a gun battle does kick off, it can be chaotic. It can be very frenetic. You'll have a full set of AI commands at your fingertips, but giving orders in the middle of a gunfight can be really difficult. Even when you're working with human players, communication can break down when gunfire starts. It does a good job ratcheting up the tension. It's an incredibly tense game that's brutally difficult, and it just requires careful, deliberate patience to really overcome every challenge and essentially do a perfect mission. If you take your eyes off the ball for a second, you can totally be screwed, screw your buddies, game over. Especially because it could be game over for some of these marathon length missions that might last for 30 minutes or more. That steady ramp up of difficulty does not mess around. Next, over at number 7, for our money, Bravely Default 2 is like one of the most difficult, stress-inducing recent JRPGs, especially like definitely on Nintendo Switch. There are other difficult RPGs on the system, plenty of them, but none really have the Brave and Default combat system. This game allows you to bank turns and then spend them later to pull off powerful combos. Saving up extra turns and spending them all with your party is a great pleasure. It's so satisfying, and your enemies can actually pull the same tricks. So each fight is like a puzzle as you try to figure out how to survive and eventually win by spending these saved turns or dipping into a deficit just to survive. Look, the risk-reward system of combat single-handedly turns an average RPG into a game of 4D big brain chess as you just try to count how many turns you're going to need to save and how many you can spare to spend. If you spend too many, you're going to be stuck motionless for several returns with your ass out there and you're going to get beat. And later jobs make this system even more complicated. It is a head-spinning concept that's also incredibly rewarding. Once you get the hang of it, you're going to feel real smart. Next at number 6, of course, the fastest Souls game award has to go to Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. This is a lightning-paced game, you probably know. It pulls a lot of the exploration out and replaces it with straightforward, good, brutal combat. This game alone has some of the toughest bosses in game history and FromSoft history. And you don't have to reach the very end before you're challenged in a really big way. The mid-game boss, Junichiro, is a major stumbling block for new players because of his thunder-based attacks. You'll have to learn a totally new parry technique just to survive. To deflect lightning, your guy must parry mid-air to launch the elemental attack back. This becomes a lot more common in the later game, and when you're already juggling a lot of mechanics and just brutal difficulty, it's easy to forget to jump, and that's the much later stages of the story. Even early on, players are going to butt heads with a rampaging ogre or stumble into a dark corner with a killer headless. This is a game where you can't even upgrade your sword until you find 3 secret collectibles. Everything is against you, and every opponent moves really, really fast. So you gotta be sharp. Next, over at number 5, XCOM 2 was already a pretty tough game. After our early campaign failure, we reset, started fresh, blazed through the original game with no huge setbacks. In XCOM 2, you play as a scattered resistance fighting back against alien occupiers, and there's always tension. Missions can go bad very quickly, and a few failures can set your campaign back to square one if you're not careful. Soldiers you level up over dozens of missions with one poor decision can die permanently. Especially like if you don't extract them, and the new alien monsters appear periodically to just throw all your plans out the window like a total wrench. It's a tough game, but it doesn't feel unfair until, of course, this is where we're getting War of the Chosen, the expansion. This was inflicted on us, man. War of the Chosen adds 3 powerful alien warriors to the mix. These chosen guys will just ambush your team and dismantle you piece by piece, capturing your soldiers before you can even react.
Interesting turn of events. Sometimes everything just goes your way. Know what I mean, Commander?
Or appearing mid-mission at the worst possible timing, forcing a failure or a retreat.
That looked like it hurt. Oh, thought you could hide, eh?
And to make things worse, the Chosen taunt you constantly, and they only get stronger when they're defeated. So like, it's an expansion that takes a manageable game and just makes it even more brutal, almost oppressive. Even with some additions on your side, like a character class and stuff, you'll need all the cheese tactics you can get to survive for long on this one.
Sounds like my reinforcements are just over the horizon. Time to move. Hold on to this for me. I bet they won't be happy when they find out you let them be taken captive, Commander.
Next at number 4, Armored Core 6 holds back for some of its runtime. By the end of the game, you'll put together a mech that's zipping around the battlefield like a rocket, dodging attacks and unleashing hell on everything. There are stumbling blocks that, caught us off guard, but nothing a little practice can't fix. The Balteus is the first real challenge of the game. You've probably heard about this one. This is the one that forces your mech pilot brain to really click into your full set of skills. It's a flame-throwing giant robot that can just burn you to a crisp very quickly, and it's just one stepping stone. Even the boss that the community is kind of dubbed like the Millennia of this game, it doesn't really compete.
I think it's controlled by Core 2.
The creature at the bottom of Institute City is an impressive, difficult boss fight, but Armored Core 6 is still holding back. It isn't until you reach the second and third playthroughs that this game really tests your skills with brutally difficult battles. It is a From Software game after all, right? I mean, like, early on in your second playthrough, you're given a choice to fight your allies during a mission to defeat enemy forces at a dam.
Raven, I represent the Rubicon Liberation Front. Our request is simple. We want you to take out the 2 red guns. Our compensation will be double Balaam's offer, awaiting your response. Interesting. Your call, 621.
Fighting 2 very powerful ACs at the same time is your first test. It only gets worse from there. By the end of the third run, if you're into this, you'll have to face off against the All-Mind boss, which pits you against a whole team of bosses and the toughest pilot in the game, and then spawns 2 more giant bosses mid-battle to make it even worse. It's one of the harshest difficulty ramp-ups in recent games. And by the end, we were begging for more. We liked it. It was cool. Now at number 3, Spelunky 2. It's the king of cruel roguelikes. Don't let the colorful graphics and the cute charm fool you. This game is pure evil. It exists to see you dead in the most humiliating way possible. You're not meant to beat Spelunky 2. You're meant to step on a trap and trigger a Rube Goldberg machine of pitfalls until your body is dropped into spikes. The first level is a skill check most players will really struggle with, or not even overcome. And that's the easiest location by far. Things only get worse when you enter the jungle. and that's just a fraction of the content in one of the most punishing video games we've played. Other games on this list are extremely difficult. Spelunky 2 slaps all that difficulty at the start and tells you it's only gonna get worse from here. This is a roguelike about diving down into a cave to reach the treasure at the bottom, and only a tiny fraction of players have actually ever finished. This isn't a Hades situation where you'll be winning runs over and over again triumphantly. A single complete run is a very rare thing in Spelunky, and there are so many optional areas to explore that they're somehow even more dangerous than your normal path. This is a game that it just requires absolute patience and extremely careful play. There are traps, pitfalls, deadly enemies around every single corner. Bombs are essential, but you can just as easily blow yourself up. And running out of rope can end your run permanently. We don't know if the creators of Spelunky 2 hate us or want us to get good. I don't know, it's probably both. Next at number 2, Khazan, the first Berserker, throws a 2-stage tough boss right at the start. By the third boss of the game, you're fighting an endgame Dark Souls battle. Like a lot of games on this list, the bosses are the biggest challenge in this game. The gameplay between bosses might as well be non-existent, with pretty simple, boring geometry and levels linking you from one boss fight to the next. But you'll be praying for those calm moments, because Khazan inflates its relatively straightforward mechanics with bosses that deal huge damage and have massive health bars. It's a problem that only gets worse later in the game, and it's one of the only games on our list that doesn't benefit from the added intensity. There's a lot of challenge in Khazan, but there's a reason you've probably never heard of this recent game. It doesn't really do anything you haven't seen a million times before from a million other FromSoft or Souls-like imitators. All it does is give big bosses even longer health bars. Some really creative boss designs, but man, is it brutal. Now at number 1, Nine Souls. It's like the Sekiro of Metroidvanias. Maybe like this seemingly cute game might actually be harder than Sekiro. It might be the hardest game on this list, and here on the gameranx team, some of the guys here, it's like their favorite game. We've mentioned it in other videos, we try and give it love. If you don't believe us, try it yourself. The opening hour introduces combat against regular enemies that's very heavy on parries. The entire game is all about parrying, and there are multiple types to just even keep track of. You'll need to learn precise parry timing, because an imprecise parry stuns your character for a moment, and that's precious time you'll need when fights get really tough. The biggest challenge is introduced later, when you'll have to pre-charge your parries for something called an unbounded counter. Keeping track of two completely different types of parry timing gives this game a much higher skill ceiling than any other games on our list, you know, at least in our opinion. At least you'll only have to worry about the X and the Y axis, at least because it's 2D. The game spikes in difficulty about halfway through when you face off against Lady Ethereal, a boss that's significantly harder than the already hard bosses from earlier in the game. This is when the game just like takes off the kid's gloves and really forces you to master its mechanics. And mastering the parry, like we mentioned, is required if you ever hope to defeat the last boss, which forces you to memorize increasingly long strings of attacks, perfectly timing every single one, hitting buttons almost like it's like a rhythm game. It's one of the toughest games on our list, and that is saying a lot. So those are 20 games that have really hard difficulty curves. Games where the difficulty ramps up, catches you by surprise, and maybe even keeps you from finishing. Look, difficulty can be subjective to some, so let us know if you got any of your own choices. Hit us up in the comments. If you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We appreciate that. Thanks for talking games with us every single day. We're always here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.